The silent watch. The vast silence of space stretched out like an endless void as Commander Jace Carter stood at the observation window of his starship, the Vanguard. The ship was a sleek, black silhouette against the shimmering backdrop of distant stars. The only sound in the cockpit was the low hum of the ship's engines, an ever-present reminder of their purpose, patrolling the border of human space. The galaxy, filled with the unknown, had been quiet for months. No signs of enemy activity. No whispers of the mysterious alien race known only as the Kreex. Commander Carter's thoughts drifted back to the previous year when the war had begun. The Kreex had attacked Earth with little warning, overwhelming humanity with their advanced technology and mind-bending weaponry. But despite the odds, humans had adapted. The Kreex may have had superior firepower, but humanity had something the Kreex did not: ingenuity. As the war continued, humans found ways to counter the aliens' every move. There had been victories, small and large, and humans had proven themselves time and again. Yet, the silence today felt unnatural. It wasn't the calm before a storm. It felt like the calm of something wrong, something sinister. Commander Carter had learned to trust his instincts over the years, and right now, something deep inside him was whispering that they were being watched. Not by a ship, but by something else. He pushed the thought aside. His crew needed him calm, focused. Panic would be the end of them all. The Vanguard glided silently through the asteroid belt of the Pleiades system. The dense field of rocks and ice was the perfect cover for any enemy vessel. The Kreex had used this region before to hide their movements. But this time, they had no reason to believe that the humans would be capable of detecting them. Carter had a different plan. "Status update," Carter said, his voice cutting through the silence as he turned to the operations officer. Lieutenant Sarah Tan was hunched over her console, scanning the readouts. Her brow was furrowed, lips pressed tightly together. "We're clear, sir. No enemy ships on the scanners." But Tan hesitated, her eyes flicking nervously to the ship's sensors. "There's a slight fluctuation in the energy signatures from the outer asteroids. It's as if something is hiding within the debris." Carter's eyes narrowed. Could be natural interference, or a cloaked ship. Possibly. But it doesn't make sense. The readings are erratic, almost like it's being intentionally jammed. Commander Carter stood tall, his gaze fixed on the dark expanse outside. He had never been one to believe in coincidences. The war with the Kreex had taught him to trust the unexpected, to never dismiss a feeling of unease. He knew that whatever was hiding in the asteroid field wasn't natural. They weren't alone. Not anymore. "Set course for the anomaly. Full stealth mode," Carter ordered. His crew moved quickly, preparing the ship for the mission. The Vanguard shifted, its engines quieting to an almost imperceptible hum. They would make no sound, and hopefully, neither would the enemy. The ship was running on minimal power, using passive sensors only. They would approach undetected, as they had done countless times before in this war. Minutes passed in tense silence as the Vanguard crept forward. Commander Carter stood by the observation window, his thoughts a whirl of possibilities. He thought about his family, his wife, Alina, and his young daughter, Mira. He hadn't seen them in over a year. The war was relentless, and it had taken so much from him. But humanity was still standing. And no matter how long it took, they would fight. They had to. Suddenly, a soft beep from Tan's console broke through his thoughts. She looked up, her expression grave. "Sir, we've got something." Carter turned quickly, crossing the room in a few long strides. He stood behind Lieutenant Tan, looking over her shoulder at the readouts. A set of energy signatures appeared on the screen, clustered together like a formation. "Cloaked ships?" he asked. Tan nodded. "It's a strong possibility. The signal is faint, but these signatures don't match anything we've encountered before. They're Kreex, but..." She hesitated. "It's like they've adapted. There's something new about them." Commander Carter's heart raced. The Kreex had always been technologically advanced, but to hear that they had evolved their methods, Their tactics was something new. He knew the Kreex wouldn't have let a small ship like the Vanguard get this close without preparing a trap. But they hadn't expected humans to evolve faster than they had. Carter gripped the edge of the console, his mind calculating the next move. Prepare the weapon systems, but don't activate them yet. We need to observe. His orders were met with a series of affirmatives, and the crew began to ready the ship. The Kreex might have evolved their cloaking technology, but Carter had something they didn't: human ingenuity. Outside the observation window, the asteroid field seemed to move. The rocks and ice that had once been still now appeared to be shifting, their movements deliberate. Carter's suspicion was confirmed. The Kreex weren't just hiding in the debris. They were using the asteroids as cover for their ships, maneuvering them with incredible precision. "Status report," Carter barked, his voice sharp. "Energy readings are increasing, sir. The Kreex are preparing to fire." Without warning, a burst of energy erupted from the asteroid field. The Vanguard shook violently as the blast struck its shields, but the ship held firm. Carter's heart raced. It was a direct hit, but the Kreex hadn't anticipated the Vanguard's upgraded defense systems. The humans had learned quickly to adapt to the Kreex's technology. They had been waiting for this. "Return fire," Carter ordered, his voice calm but forceful. His crew moved swiftly, launching a barrage of laser fire into the asteroid field. The beams sliced through the debris, creating violent explosions that illuminated the darkness of space. For a moment, there was silence. Then the enemy ships began to reveal themselves, their cloaking shields failing under the attack. The Kreex were caught off guard, their formation breaking apart. The humans had once again turned the tables on their technologically superior enemies. "We have them," Carter said with a cold satisfaction. "Prepare to board. We'll take them out the old-fashioned way." The Vanguard moved in for the kill. It was time for the Kreex to learn the cost of underestimating humanity. The unexpected visitor. The silence that followed the battle felt more profound than the violent exchange itself. After Commander Jace Carter's calculated strike, the Vanguard hovered over the fragmented remains of the Kreex vessels. The starship's hull was scorched and battered, but the damage was minimal compared to what it had inflicted. Carter stood in the command center, hands resting on the edge of his console as he observed the wreckage. "We've got multiple targets dead in space, sir," Lieutenant Sarah Tan reported, her voice steady, though her eyes betrayed the fatigue of someone who had just been through an intense firefight. "It looks like the Kreex didn't expect our firepower to be so precise. Their shields collapsed almost immediately." Carter nodded. The Kreex had underestimated them again. It had been a constant theme throughout the war. The aliens might be advanced, but their arrogance and overconfidence in their technology always gave humans the upper hand. That, and their unmatched ability to adapt. Even in the heat of battle, humans were capable of coming up with strategies that the Kreex simply couldn't predict. That was their secret weapon: ingenuity. "Prepare boarding teams," Carter ordered, turning toward his first officer, Captain Lila Reed. "Let's go find out what the Kreex are hiding. We need information. Now." A soft chime interrupted the command center's busy hum, signaling a new message from one of the boarding pods. Tan glanced at the screen and frowned. "Sir, we've detected something unusual. One of the Kreex ships. It's still transmitting, but it's not responding to our communication attempts. It's almost like..." Tan's voice trailed off as the data poured in, and her eyes widened. "It's sending a distress signal. A message in Kreex code." "Distress signal," Carter echoed. "Are they surrendering?" Tan shook her head. "No, sir. It's more like a warning, though the message is garbled. Whatever's left on that ship, it's not standard Kreex communication. It's almost human." Carter's pulse quickened. A human signal from a Kreex ship. The thought seemed impossible. The war had been brutal, and human prisoners were scattered across the galaxy, held in Kreex camps, but the idea that one of their vessels could harbor a human presence was beyond troubling. It implied far more than what appeared on the surface. Could it be a trap? Captain Reed asked, crossing her arms. She was always the skeptic, a trait Carter valued in his crew. She never jumped to conclusions. I don't know, Carter muttered. But we need to investigate. Set a course to the signal's origin. Prepare a special team, and tell them to be ready for anything. I want them in full tactical gear, and I want eyes on every door. This could be our chance to gain a strategic advantage. As the Vanguard adjusted its course toward the Kreex vessel, Carter's mind raced. It wasn't just the signal that bothered him. It was the message itself. The Kreex had never shown any sign of working with humans, not willingly. So what could have prompted this? What kind of weapon or intelligence was hidden on board? Or was this an elaborate ruse, a test to see if the humans were too eager to take the bait? Within moments, the ship came into range of the wreckage, its massive form partially disintegrated from the earlier assault. The signs of battle were clear: pockmarked hulls, shredded panels, and blackened remnants of Kreex technology littered the expanse. Carter watched through the observation window as the Vanguard's drones circled the derelict vessel, scanning for any life signs. A few moments passed, and then Tan's voice came over the comm. "Sir, we've got something. Alive on board. A single human signature. It's faint, but it's definitely human. The rest of the ship is empty. Whatever's left on that vessel is not Kreex." Carter exchanged a glance with Reed. A human, alive. It didn't make sense. The ship was in no condition for life support, and the crew had been dead or captured long ago. Who was this person? And why were they on a Kreex vessel? "Prepare for immediate boarding," Carter ordered. "I want that human brought aboard, alive. No mistakes." The boarding team was a tight-knit group of soldiers, specially selected for their ability to handle high-risk situations. Each member was equipped with the best tech available: armored suits, tactical gear, and advanced weapons. Their mission was clear: enter the Kreex ship, secure the human survivor, and get out. Commander Carter, Captain Reed, and Lieutenant Tan remained on the Vanguard, watching from the command center as the boarding team made their way through the wreckage. The boarding pod deployed silently, touching down on the Kreex ship's hull with a soft thud. The team disembarked, moving swiftly toward the breach point. "On me." Sergeant Matt Daniels, the team leader, whispered into his comm. His voice was low and controlled, even in the face of unknown danger. He signaled to his squad, and they moved as one, sweeping the corridors of the derelict ship. Each corner, each door was checked with precision. There was no room for error in these situations. The deeper the team ventured into the Kreex ship, the more eerie the silence became. There were no signs of life, no Kreex bodies, no signs of struggle. It was as if the ship had been abandoned, except for the faint hum of its failing systems. As the squad reached the center of the vessel, they found the source of the distress signal, a small containment room at the heart of the ship. The door slid open with a soft hiss, revealing a dimly lit chamber. In the center of the room, strapped to a chair, was a lone figure, a human male, barely conscious. His face was gaunt, his hair unkempt, and his clothes torn. He looked like he had been through hell, his eyes bloodshot and distant. But he was alive. "Who are you?" Daniels asked, crouching beside him. The man blinked slowly, as if struggling to focus. His lips parted, but his voice was barely a whisper. "Jace Carter, Commander, Vanguard." Carter's name. The words sent a shiver down Sergeant Daniels' spine. This man had somehow survived aboard the Kreex vessel, and had even managed to send a distress signal. But what was his story? Why had he been kept alive? "Come on, we need to get you back to the Vanguard," Daniels said gently, but the man's eyes flared with sudden, fearful awareness. "No, you don't understand," the man rasped, his voice trembling. "It's not what you think. They didn't capture me. They wanted me to stay. They've been testing me." Daniels froze, his pulse quickening. Testing him? This was no ordinary prisoner. "What do you mean?" Daniels asked, trying to make sense of the cryptic statement. But the man only shook his head. "They've been learning from me," the man muttered. "And now I have to stop them." Commander Carter watched as the team extracted the human survivor, his mind racing. This was no ordinary encounter. The message from the Kreex wasn't a simple distress call. It was a warning, an invitation, and a trap all in one. The survivor's words were just the beginning. As the boarding team returned to the Vanguard, Carter knew that this was far from over. The true conflict was just beginning, and the fate of humanity rested on a man who had been both prisoner and unwilling participant in the Kreex's cruel experiments. The road ahead would be more dangerous than ever, and the secrets of this human survivor held the key to the next chapter in the war. But one thing was certain: the Kreex had made a grave mistake by letting him live. And now, humanity would learn just how powerful a single human mind could be. Unraveling the truth. The Vanguard buzzed with activity as the team returned, the human survivor now under medical care. Commander Jace Carter had ordered the ship to head back to the nearest human-controlled space station, where they would have a chance to properly analyze the survivor's condition. The war had cost humanity dearly, and this was an unexpected break. But Carter knew better than to take any of this for granted. There were still too many unanswered questions. The man, his name was Lieutenant Aaron Hayes, and according to his records, he had been aboard the Saratoga, a human warship that had been lost to the Kreex nearly 6 months ago. Hayes had been reported dead, along with the rest of the crew. But somehow he had survived, and now he was in possession of knowledge that could turn the tide of the war. Carter sat at the command center, his fingers tapping restlessly on the console. He knew that if they were to have any hope of winning the war, they needed to understand exactly what the Kreex had done to Hayes. The tests they had subjected him to, the knowledge they had extracted from him, and most importantly, how Hayes had managed to escape the horrors of the alien ship and send a distress signal. Tan and Reed had been busy gathering all the information they could. There were still so many gaps, so much left unexplored. But one thing was becoming clear: the Kreex were playing a much deeper game than anyone had imagined. "Captain Reed," Carter said, breaking the silence, "any updates on Hayes' condition?" Reed turned from the tactical screens. "His vitals are stabilizing, but he's still in and out of consciousness. We haven't gotten much out of him yet. His trauma is severe, physically and mentally. It's going to take time." Carter nodded. "I understand, but we need answers. This might be our only shot at understanding what the Kreex are planning next." "We'll try again," Reed assured him, before turning her attention back to Hayes. It was hours later when Lieutenant Hayes finally came to. His eyes fluttered open, and his gaze was unfocused for a moment. The room around him was sterile and unfamiliar, a far cry from the cold, metallic walls of the Kreex ship. Slowly, his mind seemed to catch up with reality, and the look of fear that had clouded his features earlier shifted into something else: resolve. Commander Carter was the first to approach. He could see the mental strain in Hayes' eyes, the way his body tensed at every sound, every movement. This man had been through something horrific, something beyond the capabilities of most soldiers to endure. And yet, he was still here. "You've been through a lot," Carter began, his voice soft but firm. "But we need to know everything you can tell us. The Kreex were holding you captive, but you're the only one who survived. What did they do to you? What are they planning?" Hayes blinked, his throat dry, but he nodded slowly. "I remember. Flashes, being in the containment room. They kept me awake for what felt like months. At first it was just physical tests, like they wanted to see how much pain I could handle. They were studying me. But then," Hayes' eyes widened, and his breath quickened. "Then they started probing my mind. I thought I was going crazy. I didn't know if it was real or just some twisted illusion. But it was real, Commander. They were inside my head." Carter leaned forward, his brow furrowed in concern. "What do you mean, inside your head?" Hayes swallowed hard, his hands shaking. They weren't just scanning my brain. They were trying to break it. They used some kind of psychic technology to push me to the edge, to twist my thoughts. It felt like they were trying to rewrite who I was, trying to erase my memories, my will. And the worst part was, they succeeded. For a while, I didn't know if I was still me anymore. They made me relive my worst memories over and over, but through their eyes, through their understanding. Reed looked at Carter, her face a mixture of disbelief and horror. Psychic manipulation. That's not what we've seen from the Kreex before. Carter shook his head. No, this is something new. And it's worse than we thought. Hayes, how did you escape? How did you manage to survive all of that? Hayes stared at the ceiling, his eyes distant. I didn't escape. Not at first. I couldn't. But then, they made a mistake. They underestimated me. They tried to break me down, to make me weak. But the more they pushed, the more I adapted. I realized something. They couldn't understand how human minds worked. They didn't know how to deal with the chaos in our heads. You see, the Kreex, they're all about order, structure. Everything has to fit into perfect, logical patterns. But humans, we're different. We can hold contradictions. We can process things that don't make sense. And that's what saved me. Commander Carter listened intently, understanding dawning on him. You used their own technology against them. Not exactly, Hayes replied, a weak smile crossing his lips. I didn't just use their technology. I turned it on them. I learned how to manipulate their psychic probes. I wasn't just resisting them anymore. I started to understand how they thought, how they processed information. And once I understood that, I took control. I began feeding them false information. I sent them into loops, confusing their systems. It was like a game, Commander. And I had to win. Carter leaned back in his chair, stunned by what Hayes was saying. So, you're telling me that you manipulated their psychic systems. You hijacked their technology to send them false signals. Hayes nodded. Exactly. It wasn't easy. It took time. But once I figured out their patterns, I used them to my advantage. I made them believe they were making progress, but all the while, I was feeding them lies. I kept them busy, distracted. And when the time came, I used the last of my strength to send out that distress signal. I knew it would reach you. Carter sat in stunned silence for a moment. Hayes had not only survived the Kreex's experiments, but he had turned the tables on them in a way that no one could have predicted. The implications were staggering. If Hayes could manipulate their psychic systems, then humanity had a weapon of unimaginable potential at their disposal. Hayes, Carter said, finally breaking the silence. You've just given us a chance to turn the tide of this war. But we need to learn more. We need to understand what the Kreex are planning next. If they're using psychic technology on humans, they could be trying to do something far worse than what we've seen. We need to prepare. Hayes looked at Carter, his eyes burning with determination. I can help you, Commander. I've seen what they're capable of. But you need to act fast. The Kreex won't stop until they've perfected their control over human minds. And if they succeed, it won't just be humanity at risk. It'll be the entire galaxy. Commander Carter's jaw clenched. This was no longer just about survival. It was about stopping an enemy that had learned to exploit human minds. And Hayes was their key to stopping it. As the Vanguard hurtled toward the next phase of their mission, Carter knew one thing for certain. The war had just entered a new dangerous chapter, and humanity's greatest strength, its ability to adapt, to survive, and to outthink any foe, was going to be tested like never before.